All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. I hope you're doing well this morning. So, we're going to continue with the Apostle, David E. Taylor Marathon. And today, we're going to go over the first chunk of the first day of David E. Taylor's infamous deposition. And the key players, what's funny about it is the whole 7 hours is just on his face, which I gotta say is not a great face. I said yesterday that he does have palindrome face, and if you look at old footage of this guy, he looks pretty good. It's almost like lying to people constantly and scamming crippled people make you age bad because, man, David, your face shouldn't look like this, you know? This guy aged like my Shane Carey video. It's not good. And so the whole thing is just a picture of his face, and then you just hear the other characters. And I always think, he's sitting here at the beginning, not even a question has been asked yet. And I think, well, I wonder if he knows what he is about to go through and how hard he is about to chew his lip and how many times he is going to suggest on record under oath that someone axed Michelle. And I don't think he does. But you would think he would be a little bit nervous or scared because a big part of this deposition and the court order and the subpoena and the whole, under oath was they had to produce a big list, 11 things of financial records pertaining to Deborah Frazier, who was the woman that cashed out her 401k and gave the whole thing to the apostle, David E. Taylor. Just the whole thing. And cashing out her 401k created a huge tax bill, which she had no way of even coming close to paying. So all of a sudden, she went from having this nice little nest egg to a huge tax bill. And then she cashed in the equity of her house that she owned outright and gave that to the apostle. And then a year later was pretty much homeless and completely, screwed. And so this deposition, I watched the whole thing, the 7 hours over the weekend, trying to figure out what it is. And the answer's in the first sentence. So the players are, she goes, "My name is Colleen." The lawyer goes, "My name is Colleen, and I am representing Rick Frazier." So there you go. Rick Frazier has got to be Deborah Frazier's husband. So either they're getting a divorce and this is part of the divorce, or Rick is suing the apostle because of all this money. So imagine Rick Frazier. You're a guy going through life, and then you hear either your wife or your ex-wife, really doesn't matter because you have kids together and you're going to have your financial lives intertwined no matter what. Imagine hearing that she gave everything to an apostle named David E. Taylor. I picture him being like, "What?" And then you're gonna search this guy and probably find his YouTube, and it's gonna be live stream. He live streams a speech he did called "Remembering 9/11" 24/7, where he says he prophesied 9/11. Yeah, it would have been real great for the heads up, buddy. And so the players are Colleen, who is an absolute savage. She is doing exactly what she should be doing in this life, which is a lawyer at these depositions. And she really kicks David's ass the whole time. And so Colleen and Rick Frazier, Deb's ex, I think, husband, is sitting in there. And then Jerry is David E. Taylor's lawyer. And Jerry doesn't have as good of a day, but you can't really blame it on Jerry because imagine being an apostle's lawyer. You're just like, all right, do you have any financial records at all? And he's just like, well, if you could just ask Michelle? And it's like, yeah, I know, we're going to ask Michelle, all right? We're going to ask her. But we actually need this stuff because there's a court order for it. David, please. If you could just please ask Michelle. And so the first chunk of the deposition on day one is Colleen, Rick Frazier's lawyer, asking Jerry, David's lawyer, about this packet that they handed him. So the court ordered all these financial records, mostly dealing with Deb Frazier and the $1.2 million that she gave to this apostle guy. So the court ordered, you got to give all these records. And then, so on this first day of the deposition, they gave this packet over to Colleen. And pretty much nothing that the court ordered is in this packet. So the first part of the deposition is just Colleen asking Jerry, so you were supposed to give up any bank statements that pertain to the $1.2 million that Deborah Frazier gave the apostle. And she refers to him as the apostle, and it starts to sound like more of an insult as the whole thing goes. Like, all right, I'll ask the apostle that one. And so they go the list. So the first thing is she goes, there's no bank statements that go over the $1.2 million. And Jerry, the lawyer's like, yeah, well, I gave you everything that JMMI, which is his scam ministry company that he owns, I gave you everything that JMMI gave me. And she's like, well, that's fabulous that you gave me everything that the apostles company gave you, but in your opinion, does anything in this stupid packet satisfy for bank statements that reflect? And he starts saying things like, if they exist, for the extent that they exist, I will provide them. That's really his go-to line. She's like, well, how about this one? And he's like, if they exist, I will provide them. And Jerry just starts to take a beating right off the bat, to the point where he's like, I'm not here to testify. You have a deponent right here. She hasn't even asked David Taylor any questions yet. He's still just sitting there like, Michelle. And so Jerry is just getting beat up because they go in the thing. So the second one, the first one was the bank statements, not there. And then the third one are any and all correspondence, so emails and anything for 2012, 13, and 14 between Deborah Frazier and David E. Taylor. There's nothing for that. Number 4 was the board of directors minutes for JMMI for 12, 13, and 14. Nothing for that. So I wonder what David Taylor thought sitting there or heading into this deposition and going, okay, they asked for this packet and we didn't give any of it. So this is gonna be fun. And number 5 was tax exempt docs for his, these churches and ministries have got to start paying taxes. It's just insane to listen to this deposition and hear all of the little, like, he owns the building but rents it to the ministry, but it's really just himself, and the whole thing is just a scam nightmare. So number 6 is articles of incorporation. I can't remember if he has that one. Number 7 is financial records from JMMI for 2012, 13, and 14. 2013 is missing. Number 8 is list of assets and liabilities for JMMI for 12, 13, and 14. Again, 2013 is completely missing. So Colleen is just going, okay, well, we had a court order for these records and 2013 is missing. And Jerry, the lawyer, is just being like, well, I don't know, ask the deponent. I'm not here to testify. And she's like, well, it's pretty standard procedure for the lawyers to go over the documents. And it goes on, and basically none of them are there. And so in the first chunk of this deposition, they already have to agree to come back another day. And they agree to that they're going to send in all of this missing stuff. So she starts talking to David finally, just being like, so you would agree that if someone wired you $1.2 million, that there would be a bank statement reflecting that? And he goes, of course, yes, of course, which is hilarious because he doesn't know shit this whole deposition, right down to his kids' names almost. They're just, he's like, I actually don't handle my children's names. If you could just ask Michelle. And so when he does, like, want to seem confident or something, he always goes, of course, yeah, of course. It's like, you just didn't know your fucking kid's name. Why are you saying of course like you're some confident guy now? All right, so they go over the list, and she gets him to admit, of course, that if there's someone donated all of this money, there would at least be a bank statement. So surely they can get a copy of the bank statement. He's going, of course, yeah. All right. Then they talk about Rosh Hashanah, like a big chunk of the money he spent on the Rosh Hashanah service that he did. And he just rambles, and anything that he can, I think he's just like, okay, if I can just make this so boring and just, I won't have to actually, I can get through the really hard parts by just making everything else boring. So she's like, part of the money said it went to Rosh Hashanah. Explain that. And he's like, well, Rosh Hashanah is a 10-day holiday, and it's a service. And she's like, okay, I know that. And at one point, he was like, yes, I held a leadership conference in which it's where I teach leaders. Imagine being taught by David E. Taylor. It's like, I'm looking to be a leader in this life, and my mentor is an apostle. And okay, so as he's trying to make it sound just normal that they didn't produce any of these documents, he goes, I think what it is my office just didn't know exactly what you wanted. And with that phrase, my office, we really get going. And I think this is really what David E. Taylor was not prepared for this type of deposition. Is he's been used to his whole life of just mucking up kind of the details. So just being like, oh, yeah, my office handled that, or that was handled by the board, or I have a financial executive board that handles stuff like that for me. And so if you're just talking to some crippled person or mentally ill person that you're scamming, an answer like that is sufficient for something. If they're just like, hey, I maybe gave you more money than I was hoping to. Can I, I'm homeless now. He could just be like, well, I have a financial board that handles all of that. My executive staff. He can just kind of complicate it with business jargon. We're having a systems issue, and the staff with my board, and we'll figure it out. But here, for the first time, I think he goes, yeah, my office didn't, handle the... And Colleen's able to say, okay, when you say your office, who is that? And, and it's established it's really just Michelle and 2 volunteers. And, you got to ask her. And also, she goes, okay, where is your office? And he owns offices and these houses and centers and all this stuff all over Minnesota and all over St. Louis. And so this guy, I think, what's his name? The husband. What's his name? Rick Frazier. I think he's probably either suing or they're trying to just make David look so bad, and such a scam artist that he has to give some of Deborah's money back. And so, he wants to hide. David Taylor wants to hide all of these assets that he has and try not to bring them up. So she goes, okay, where is your office? And he's like, it's here in Taylor, Michigan. And she goes, okay, well, what's the address of that? And I don't know if he was trying to just muddle up like the court record, but he was like, yeah, the address is, it's 23, 2020, no, it's 203, 2020, no, it's 23. And she's like, what is it? And he's like, it's, and he finally gets it out. It's 20320 Superior Road. And that's the official JMI building. And more comes out on this building, but there's something like he's renting it to other ministries and he owns it, but he pays rent to himself. And it's all about just double dipping and scamming and telling crippled people they can walk again and then throwing their cane. That's his whole thing. And there's another ministry that they let use it called the Kingdom Family Church, KFC. Perfect. And right about this time, I think that Jerry knows that David's about to start eating it pretty bad. So he does the first objection to relevance. And Colleen really handles his objections really well. He'll just be like, I would like to object for relevance. And she's like, yeah, all right, that's fine. Go ahead. She doesn't get swayed. She doesn't get pushed off course. She's like, okay, yeah, you can object for relevance. Good job. Good for you. She has this attitude of like, yeah, good for you. Okay, so they go over the office in Michigan, and she goes, okay, do you have an office in St. Louis? And he goes, oh, no, I have a P.O. box in St. Louis that we get mail from. And she goes, okay, you have 0 building in St. Louis. You don't have offices. You don't have any And he goes, no. And she goes, well, if you have to do work in St. Louis, where do you go? And he goes, well, you could work out of like a little home, someone's little home. And she goes, little home? What does that mean? And he's not used to being, pushed. Like, what are you saying? You said little home. Just answer. If you have to do work in St. Louis, where do you do it? And he's like, well, if the people in St. Louis, if they have a house, then we could do like a home office situation where we have laptops. And he's getting angrier as this goes because I think he knows. He's like, this is about to get bad. And she goes, so you're working at a little home in St. Louis on a laptop? And he kind of gets mad and goes, yes, I'm sure you work at your home. Do you have a laptop? And she goes, no, I have an office. And she's like, to be clear, do you have a building, an office or non-office in St. Louis? And he goes, no. And then she goes, okay, where is the residential center? And he goes, oh, in St. Louis. And then there's a pause, and he goes, you said office, so you know that he knows that he just got caught in a pretty embarrassing lie. She asked him clearly, do you have any buildings in St. Louis? And he goes, no, I just got a P.O. box. And then she's like, yeah, well, what about this residential center? And he goes, oh, yeah, that's in St. Louis. And what the residential center is a giant mansion with a pool. And she's like, so you have a house? And he's like, oh, no, well, it's actually more of a residential center than a house. And so he explains the residential center. And then it also comes out that he has an apartment also in St. Louis. And so now she's asking him, how many days do you stay at this residential center? How many days do you stay at this apartment? And he's trying to just say just enough where it's like an answer, but like there's all these things, like if you stay in a place a certain amount of nights, it's your primary residence. And if you and if you don't, then it's another certain type of thing, but he doesn't know that. And so she, instead of just being like, is this your primary residence? Or, you have to stay at this place 10 times to make it your primary residence. Do you? She goes, all right, so how many times do you stay at this place? And he's just squirming like, yeah, well, like maybe 5 or maybe 10. And he's establishing that he barely even goes to these places. And then she starts asking him about his kids. And then it's like a light bulb goes off that he stays at the apartment with his kids every weekend. And then he does this whole like, yeah, I thought you were talking about the residential center. I do stay in the apartment more or something. And at this point, he's mad. And he goes, regarding how she was like, well, where's this residential center? He goes, oh, it's in St. Louis. You should have said office. And he's mad that he looks like an idiot. And one of my favorite lines is he tells her, you didn't ask plain enough. And then she's like, I think I did ask plain enough. And he goes, you need to be more Pacific. You need to be more Pacific. And, maybe we all need to be a little bit more Pacific. I feel like I've been pretty Atlantic, but you got to be Pacific in this life. And so he runs into a brick wall with this residential center, and he's flustered, and at 41 minutes in, he's visibly mad. And then they go over the apartment, and then they go over his kids and some of the wives that he's had and divorced, and it's not really that interesting. And then this chunk ends, at least with the Jim Jones, the People's Temples cult. At least you give him all your money and your house and your everything. At least you got something in return, like you would get a place to stay. And with David Taylor's, they're talking about how, so he owns this huge giant mansion in St. Louis, and he owns this an apartment, and this woman, David Taylor, is volunteering when he does these crusades where he's like, your cancer is healed, and then he throws a walker. They're talking about like, okay, when Deborah Frazier, the person that gave you $1 million, comes to, does she get to stay in this mansion? And he's like, no, I think she stays at a motel. It's just like, damn, that is cold. But, who knows? Maybe it's the lawyer at this point. Maybe she does just need to be more Pacific, I'm not sure, but I'm going to cut it off there. We will keep going on the Apostle David E. Taylor Marathon right here on True Crime Loser. Why, Stiv and why? Shut